El Chino Antrax, the highest-ranking hitman of the Sinaloa cartel, is also known as the guy who dressed up as a clown that assassinated Francisco Rafael Arellano Felix, of the Tijuana cartel, in front of everybody at his 63rd birthday party. He would go on to found Los Antrax, an armed wing that protected Ishmael Zambada, alias El Mayo. Jose Rodrigo Arechiga Gamboa, better known by his alias, El Chino Antrax, was born on June 15, of 1980, in Culiacan, Sinaloa. He had a fairly normal childhood, in a highly respected family, since his father was a government official and his mother was a teacher. Growing up, his next-door neighbor was the family of Ishmael El Mayo Zambada, one of the founders of the Sinaloa cartel. El Mayo's sons and El Chino were around the same age and went to school together. El Chino's mother would say this about her son's relationship with the Zambadas: they went to school together, they played together, they participated in sports together, they attended social events together, they grew to be best friends. No one knows how much influence the Zambadas had in El Chino, but you should know that El Mayo Zambada did not leave out his children from his cartel business. However, as El Chino got older, he did not show any signs that he would live an illicit lifestyle. El Chino tried to be a pilot in the Mexican army, but failed the physical, because he had a skin condition called psoriasis. Then he shifted his focus to other things. More specifically, he decided to get a degree in architecture at a university. During his time at the university, two life-changing events happened in fairly rapid succession. One was that he had a daughter and the other was that he got married. These new responsibilities forced him to drop out of school, and this is when things take a dramatic turn for the worse. This new chapter in life as a father and a husband proved to be incredibly difficult for El Chino. When it became unbearable to provide for his family, he turned to his childhood friends, the Zambada brothers, for help. One of the brothers, Vicente Zambada, alias El Vincentillo, helped El Chino in the only way he could, by introducing him to the business. El Chino Antrax was first entrusted with small and harmless tasks, such as driving shipments and supervising merchandise to their destinations, and when he did these tasks perfectly, that Vincentillo introduced him to drug trafficking. It was during this time that the creativity of El Chino entered the spotlight. He came up with ingenious methods to get shipments of cocaine and marijuana across the border without getting caught. His plan was to create a network of legitimate businesses that required shipments from Mexico into the United States. Then he would establish several legitimate trucking companies. Those who delivered those shipments in this way could legally cross the trucks because they had the proper documentations, and the Border Patrol would have no idea that tons and tons of drugs were hidden in each truck. In a short time, El Chino became a major player within the Sinaloa cartel and caught the attention of Vicentillo's father, El Mayo, who began to like him. But somewhere around this time, something broke within El Chino, or maybe it has always been there, because that's when he began to exhibit an insatiable bloodlust, willingly involved himself in the grisly parts of the cartel. He was more than willing to murder people, however it was the things he would do to the bodies of the people he killed that made him a notoriously feared urban legend. Mutilated bodies, like warning banners, were hung on bridges within Sinaloan territory, and the rumor in the city was that anyone who died at his hands of El Chino would continue to suffer in the afterlife for what they had done to his body. El Mayo took advantage of El Chino's violent impulse and added him to his list of ruthless hitmen, and more importantly, he became El Vicentillo's personal bodyguard. Sometime around 2008, El Chino was removed from his bodyguard duties and was assigned a new, more important assignment by El Mayo Zambada. A war was brewing within the Sinaloa cartel. An ally of the Sinaloa cartel had split off and the Beltran Leyva organization was at war. Although their fight was with Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, El Mayo was trapped in the middle of it and had to join the war. The situation was the perfect storm for El Chino. He formed his own armed squad of the Sinaloa cartel and named it Los Antrax, in honor of the infamous deadly bacteria. Members of his team included Jesus Pena, alas, L20, and René Velázquez Valenzuela, alias El Sargento Fenix, among many other. Each Antrax member was given a skull ring. As head of the group, he would be known as El Chino Antrax. They had two jobs: one was the protection of El Mayo Zambada, AMD, the second was the war against Los Charritos, a hitman squad of the Beltran Leyva organization. The Antrax hit squad wreaked havoc in Sinaloa during a period of 5 years of endless violence, and El Chino became an unrecognizable monster. Every time they collided with the Beltran Leyva members, it was a bloodbath with casualties on both sides, including civilians. Meanwhile, the Mexican army joined the party and began to kill members of both factions. After a while, members of rival cartels got fed up and began to eliminate the members of the Antrax. Meanwhile, El Chino began to have a taste for the center of attention. His group, suffered blow after blow and his leadership began to look unstable in the eyes of El Mayo. On November 1 of 2011, during a soccer game in Culiacan, Sinaloa, an armed command interrupted the game and killed Francisco Arce Rubio, member of Los Antrax. According to police reports, several armed men, carrying AK-47s, interrupted the soccer game at the Jimmy Ruiz Sports Stadium and forced all the players to lie face down on the field around 11 p.m. Once they had subjected everyone on the field, the gunman executed one of the team's managers and then, 30-year-old, Arce Rubio. After the double homicide, the gunman left the field. There was violence everywhere. Meanwhile, El Chino took revenge on his enemies. He also chose to maintain a questionable social media influence, as crazy as it sounds and frankly should not have, flaunted his wealth on social media. He essentially became a social media influencer. He made millions of dollars with the cartel and unsurprisingly spent those millions on flashy cars, rented expensive yachts, bought expensive watches and houses. El Chino also wrote several narco corridos about himself in which he described himself as an elegant man who enjoyed his sports cars, yachts, drank champagne, posting everything on social media for the world to see. He even posed with celebrities like Paris Hilton. While he may have blurred his face to stay anonymous, security agencies around the world started following him and it did not take long for them to find a way to catch him. Although El Chino made efforts to hide his identity, his signature Antrax ring was on his finger in every picture. He would never take it off and this would ultimately lead to his downfall. In the last months of 2013, he was arrested and transferred to jail on the 31st of December. Only a few months after assassinating the head of the Tijuana cartel, El Chino decided to take a vacation. He left Mexico and headed to the Netherlands, and immediately after landing, he was arrested by members of the Dutch police. A few days before, the United States had alerted the Dutch authorities that a 33-year-old Mexican citizen, who was a drug trafficker, would arrive in their country in a few days and they wanted him to be arrested. So immediately after landing, they spotted him and detained him. However, the identification process was not easy because El Chino was flying under a false identity of a dead man, probably one he killed. He grew his facial hair and slightly altered his face with plastic surgery. What helped authorities identify him was his Antrax ring, which he had foolishly kept on his finger. On July 10 of 2014, El Chino was extradited to the United States and was indicted on drug charges. At first, El Chino was stubborn and pleaded not guilty to the drug charges against him, but later after several hearings, El Chino did a complete 360, and on March 20 of 2015, he pleaded guilty and admitted that he had been involved in the shipping of cocaine and marijuana, and to facilitating violent activities while working for the Sinaloa cartel. This change of heart was suspicious and there was many questions at that time. He suddenly started confessing. What kind of offer could have the authorities offered that he could not refuse? At the end of the trial, the offer was made quite clear, when he received a very light sentencing of only 6 years in prison and 5 years probation. During the 6 years of imprisonment, El Chino had betrayed almost all of those who he collaborated with the U.S. prosecutor's office, giving names, addresses, and exposing their ways of operation. The information he shared was so useful that it contributed greatly to destabilize important parts of the Sinaloa cartel. Everyone in the business, including El Mayo, was fully aware that their golden boy had turned traitor. On March 3 of 2020, he was paroled and placed on house arrest in the United States. For obvious reasons, the terms of his probation limited him to a 500-meter radius of his California home. However, 2 months later in May, he escaped his probation and returned to Culiacan to live with his sister and her husband. 10 days later, on the night of May 14, 2020, his sister and her husband were in their house, when suddenly, armed men invaded the property and started shooting at them. El Chino responded with shots, but eventually ran out of ammunition and all of them were taken hostage. The next morning, El Chino's body alongside his sister and her husband were discovered wrapped in cloth and with plastic bags on their heads in the back of a black BMW SUV. They had been tortured and shot to death. There was much speculation as to who might have ordered this attack against El Chino. Some say that they were probably members of the Tijuana cartel, who took revenge on him for the murder of their boss, while others point their fingers at the remaining members of the now defunct Beltran Leyva organization. However and whoever, the attack occurred deep within Sinaloan territory, and there is no way that someone could have launched such attack without the knowledge of El Mayo, or the main members of the Sinaloa cartel. In the months after the attack, when there was no retaliation, reaction, or revenge, for the murder of his former top hitman, it became clear that El Mayo must have been the one who ordered the murder, and if he didn't, he definitively allowed it. El Chino was a traitor, who had sold them and their business. In the world of crime, this was unforgivable. El Chino chose to leave the safety of his home in the United States, to return to his hometown of Culiacan, Sinaloa, where he should have known he was not safe.